Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at one of the biggest transits of the week, and that is the conjunction of Venus and Mars in the sign of Aquarius. So these two planets are coming together in the sign of Aquarius this week to conjoin. That dance will be happening all week. Both planets are also moving into a square with Jupiter. This is probably the headline of the week, but there's a few other things we'll be looking at as the week goes on. That's where we're going to start today. So before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections. We'd love to hear from you guys. As always, it's really nice to create community around these posts by hearing your stories. I have a grabbed episode in queue, but we have had so many aspects, so many big, powerful aspects day after day after day, just loads of them, that I'm waiting for a bit of a lull in the action. Those episodes are very good for the kind of, the winter doldrums when there's just like 4 or 5 days where there's not really any transits going on. And I'm always looking for content to use during those times. So you will have a great grabbed episode coming up as soon as I feel like that's the space that's open for it. Anyway, you can find a transcript of any of my daily talks, including today, on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I want to take you over there because we had a very successful and very fun first meeting last week to look at the presence of Pluto in love and relationships. If you go over to my website, nightlightastrology.com, and you click on the events page, go to live events. If you're on the home page, just click the live events tab there. It'll take you to these upcoming live events. You'll see that in March on the 14th from 7 to 9 p.m., so a couple weeks away yet, we're moving on to the next part in the series called Neptune in Love. Now, you don't have to have seen the first one to see this one. Of course, the first one will be available to purchase in the shop. So, you can pick it up there if you want to get the replay. The shop page is not up as of the time I'm recording this, but it will be shortly. And then the webinar registration for Neptune in Love, we'll be looking at Neptune and the significations of Neptune in love and relationships in the birth chart and by transit, how to work with this kind of energy when it's coming into your life or we were born with it. It's a really, really good series to be looking at the outer planets in love and relationships. And then you'll see in April, if you scroll down, we're going to do Uranus in love as well. So you get the replay. If you can't attend live, the link is sent to you, so you can download it to your device and watch it later if you can't make it live. Hopefully we'll see some of you there for this next installment in this new series I'm doing. So anyway, any questions, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, so let's look at the real-time clock. And as always, let's get a feel for what's happening first. So you can see here the lovers are coming together, and this is by Wednesday, February 21st. So it's a big transit happening this week, and you'll see that they hit that 6-degree mark together on the same degree, which puts them into a 3-degree engagement range with Jupiter in Taurus, which is the other major aspect that'll be happening this week, is these planets going into the square. So we see that Venus crosses over Mars between Wednesday, February 21st and Thursday, February 22nd. So if you give it just a little bit more time, then you're going to see them kind of getting out of that 3-degree range of separation, not until, middle of next week. So they're really kind of hanging out together for a little while. Now, the other thing that's happening is you can see here, between Saturday, February 24th, and Sunday, the 25th, Venus will head through a square to Jupiter. And then Mars will follow suit, and Mars will start hitting the square to Jupiter by Monday of next week. So they're both heading into the square over the weekend. So we'll be covering that square at the end of this week a little bit more. But yeah, both planets coming together in a conjunction in Aquarius. And the other thing that's interesting is if we sort of back up and look at their conjunction, which happens just after the 7th degree. So that puts them, interestingly, just over the edge into the bound of Venus. So these two planets will come together right in the boundary of Venus, a certain number of degrees in Aquarius that Venus has rulership in. This is nice because it gives us a little bit more of a Venusian flavor. And then whoa-de-doty, whoa-de-doty, we have the square coming into Jupiter, who's in Venus's domicile, right? We've got the Sun and Saturn in Venus's exaltation and bound. We've got Mercury about to enter Venus's bound and exaltation. So again, if you've been watching my channel, for the past while now, you may have noticed that lately I've been emphasizing how much underlying power Venus has in the sky. These dignities help us to see that. So with that in mind, this is not just your normal Venus-Mars conjunction where the lovers are on equal footing. No, no. Venus has a bit more power in the sky right now. So that does change how we're going to look at things this week. And it will play a role in how I continue to delineate this for us as the week goes on. But we're not going to do any galaxy brain stuff today. We are just purely going to talk about the archetypal combination of Venus and Mars in general to start the week. And then as we go on, we'll galaxy brain our way into some of the finer details and nuances. We might throw a couple of parallel cards in, maybe an I Ching reading, just to accent what we're looking at and look at some of the dignities a little bit more. But this is a good place to start. So in order to start here, I want to read you guys something. And then, by the way, I'm still getting over my cold. This is like the world's longest cold. And it's funny, it's like in Minnesota, every winter, like once a winter, I get a cold. It's just like without fail. When I was a kid, I grew up here. Since I've moved back, I think this is our third or fourth year back. Anyway, I've always gotten a winter cold. And the funniest thing is, I never have to end up treating it with anything. It just goes away on its own. I'll dose up with lots of herbs that Ashley gives me and all the good stuff. And you know, just kind of nurture myself through it. I swear to God, this is the longest cold I've had in years. It's just so stubborn and it's like sticky, you know? And so anyway, please, me sharing that, please do not offer tons of unsolicited medical or herbal advice in the comment section. It's like anytime you ever mention you have a cold on YouTube, people are like, well, let me tell you. So annoying. No offense to anyone. I'm sure you really care about me, which is nice, but I'm not asking for any advice. I just think it's interesting that there, like in our overall here in Minnesota, like it seems to be that this is the winter of unusually long lasting colds, like 3 to 4 weeks where you just have the ongoing, like you can do stuff. I can get stuff done. I can do my work. I can even work out. It's not like I, you know, drained of energy, but just like kind of nagging symptoms like runny nose, little bit of a sore throat, not major, blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. It's like, oh my God. Anyway, I feel like I'm on the mend though. So this is a good start to the week compared to where I was the last 2 weeks. Anyhow. All right. So I want to read you guys something. This comes from a book by James Hillman called A Terrible Love of War. He is, as you guys know, one of the I guess I'd put him as one of my soul guides in this life. His ideas, his work, his writing. He is largely responsible for the founding of what is often called archetypal psychology, which is a little bit of a spin-off of depth psychology, of the depth psychology movement that came from Jung, who in turn was sort of a contemporary of Freud's. And many of the best modern astrologers would consider themselves archetypal astrologers that align themselves on some level with the way that Hillman looked at archetypes. And also, like, you know, Liz Green, I was a contemporary of Hillman's. I think they studied together in Zurich at the Jung Institute. And Richard Tarnas, obviously, I actually went to a weekend-long series that he hosted at Pacifica where he taught on the life and work of James Hillman over the whole weekend and related a lot of it to his astrological career. So some of our most important modern archetypal and psychological astrologers would put Hillman right up there as one of the most prominent influences on their work. I fall in that same category. I've written about him in a few astrological magazines. I've done presentations on his work in relation to astrology at astrological conferences. So just in case you're new to my channel and you're like, why are you always reading James Hillman? That's why. He has a very pivotal role to play in the history of modern astrology. His son is a great astrologer. I interviewed him and talked to him about his father, and his son's an astrologer as well. Anyway, it's very, very, his work is rich if you ever want to get into it. This is one of my favorite books by him, A Terrible Love of War, wherein he talks about the need to understand war as a Mars signification, for example, in relation to love and beauty, because the two throughout history are rather inseparable as archetypes. And so that on its own is controversial. You know, hence the title, A Terrible Love of War. But the point is not to glorify war. as much as it is to understand the archetypal dyad of Venus and Mars and the way that love and beauty and terror and war are often inseparably joined to one another on various levels. So that's what we're going to look at today, among other things. We're going to talk about and tease out how the conjunction of the two planets, which means their fusion, when you fuse Mars and Venus together, how do they show up in our lives, our psychology, our relationships, our jobs? I want to read you a few passages just briefly. This is from chapter 3 of this book called War is Sublime. We have not done with Mars, and now we shall find him with his paramour Venus. War and love, battle and beauty entwined. Right at the beginning of Western fantasy, 2 millennia before our era in Crete, Ares and Aphrodite are configured together in Knossos and in Gortnia and Dreros. I'm not sure how you pronounce those words. I apologize. Then in Homer's Odyssey, Book 8, you may read how they fell in love in the palace of her husband, the armor smith, Hephaestos. The son who sees all observes them in their illicit dalliance and tells the husband Hephaestos, who is often depicted as a limping, introverted, sulky artisan. He immediately plots revenge. The offense must go to the core of his marriage, for how can he, with his deformity and heavy-handed drudgery, hold faithful Aphrodite, goddess of physical beauty and pleasure? She who authenticates the world of smiles and guiles, promiscuity, seduction, sweet courtesans, and the delights of the senses. In his workshop, Hephaestos devises a net of chains woven of invisible filaments and hangs them over the marriage bed. Then, pretending to leave the premises for one of his favorite retreats far away, he hides. The lovers, seeing their chance, rush to the bed upon which the steel mesh falls. They cannot move, not an arm, not a leg, caught in flagrant delicto. Hephaestos, in rages, shouts at them so loudly, after all, not only is she his wife, but Ares is his brother, both born of Hera, that all the gods around gather, that is, all save the goddesses, whose modesty keeps them at home. The gods stand in the doorway, observing, commenting, laughing. If the gods are there, we are too, for we are lived by forces we pretend to understand, as Auden wrote. Our attitudes and observations are informed by archetypal patterns. The gods laugh to see the helpless pair caught in the brilliant device of the insulted husband, as we are amused by Homer's clever device within this chapter of the Odyssey, except for some scholars who have found the story to be a later, inauthentic insertion into the narrative, declaring it scandalous, ridiculous, indecent. Their prissiness enacts the goddesses, whose sense of shame keeps them out of the story altogether. The gods speak among themselves about the bride price and penalties owed Hephaestos for this violation. However, when Apollo asks Hermes how he would be feeling in Ares' place, caught and exposed, Hermes said he'd be glad to change places with Ares, allowing himself to be likewise on view for all to see, if only he could lie with Aphrodite. Hermes, always with a sense of humor. Again, the gods break into laughter at Hermes' brazen admission, except for Poseidon, whom laughter did not touch, and who sets out to right the wrong and end the matter by offering to pay the adultery debt in behalf of Ares to Hephaestos. This was done, and the two lovers spring apart, each to a distant land. What is this magnetic attraction? What does love find in war? What beauty does battle afford? What does their copulation mean? To pursue these questions, we have to take our cue from Hermes, who among the gods is the one able to enter the image with imagination, taking the fantasy further by placing himself in it, caught by it, and willing to be foolishly exposed. To be caught in the tale makes it psychological, which helps explain why Hermes is often called a psychopompos guide of psyche. The tale is not merely another story about the gods, which the ancient world could spin out and listen to endlessly. It tells not only about them, but also about us. Not merely their mythology, but our psychology. The characters in myths portray the characteristics of human nature, and psychology is mythology in contemporary dress. So when the goddesses won't even show up, won't even consider the possibility that there can be beauty coupled with the savagery of war, their denial repeats our shamefaced embarrassment over our fascination with war films, with weapons of mass destruction, with pictures of blasted bodies and bombs bursting in air. Apollo looks, but with a distant hauteur, disengaging himself by asking opinions. Poseidon looks too, but he is morally affronted, a surprising response in view of the fact that he is a major chaser in Greek myth, with offspring fathered through a wicked variety of copulations and violations. He is not at all amused. He becomes sanctimonious, legalistic. Is this, too, not a familiar reaction? Do we not try to draw fixed lines between battle and beauty so as to keep our violence violent and our love loving? In short, this little tale of gossip and titillation exposes ways of resistance to and participation in the love of war. Understanding the fusion between beauty and violence, terror and love, the terrible love of war is precisely our task. The distinctions between Mars and Venus, Aries and Aphrodite, as opposites, and the reason for their mutual attraction as opposites is easy enough. Their nature seems so radically different that this pair is a familiar theme in poems and paintings through centuries. Mars pursues, Venus smooth, Mars fiery, brash, savage, and red, Venus watery, pale, receptive, and secretive, Mars armored and shielded with earthbound feet, Venus unclothed, vulnerable, lightly grounded, blood iron rams and horses, roses, pearls, waterfowl, and doves. Mars is the god of rhetorical speed, galloping along in dactyls and anapaests while beauty lingers, and because it satisfies, beauty arrests motion, according to St. Thomas. Thus, they balance each other in a compensatory system of mutual concord, each filling a gap in the other, expressed allegorically in the child of their union, harmonia. Excuse me. Give me just a second. Okay, sorry. Had to cough a lung out. Great idols of war are supposedly given to Venusian pleasure. Caesar and Napoleon, for instance, and Nelson too. Cleopatra, Josephine, and Lady Hamilton are essential to the heroes' legends. Great novels of war seem to call on Venus for their aesthetic satisfaction. A farewell to arms, for whom the bell tolls, war and peace. The Trojan War arises from the seduction of beauty. Caesar's accounts mention the impedimenta of camp followers. Elizabethan verse employs swordplay and battle as major tropes for the thrust and parry and final conquest of lovers tangled in the hay. Love lyrics speak of killing beauty, slain by beauty, of heart-stopping beauty, much as American teenagers were wont to use the description of drop dead for a gorgeous boy or girl who took your breath away. Even when Mars and Venus make conflicting claims, they remain paired. As in Carmen, a soldier's duty deserted for his body's passion, and it can be vice versa, the body's passion deserted for the call of duty. Inseparable alternatives are simply another mode of pairing. Make love, not war. Relief and recreation of the combat soldier, from battle to brothel to battle again. Understanding the pair as opposites is too easy. Even we should sophisticate opposition into various logics, contrasts, contraries, contradictories, complements, alternatives, polarities, reciprocals, or bring them together as coterminous and co-relevant with each other. They remain distinct entities without inherent connection. We still have to go to the internal necessity of the coupling of love and war. He's asking us to think about Mars and Venus, love and war, as more than just opposed opposites. He's trying to get us to think about them as interwoven parts of the same, which is very much what a conjunction of Venus and Mars is. Perhaps our habitual mindset can't think otherwise. We're schooled to believe that understanding results from definitions, each item clear and distinct. We have such hard-edged minds that we escape their narrow confines by falling happily, religiously, for fanciful scientific descriptions of fuzzy sets, indeterminacy and uncertainty, black holes, warps, waves, and chaos. Perhaps our Western Christian literalism takes each thing by its word and for what it is and not something else. Mars is war, Venus is love, never the twain can merge. We seem able to think only in accord with our beliefs, atomistically, monotheistically, each thing to itself with a distinct identity, so locked into Leibniz's self-enclosed monads and Aristotle's logic of either or that we are unable to follow Hermes into the bed of the image. It's a beautiful, so poetic. That bed, that image belongs in the house of Hephaestos, in a mythical construct, in a mythical cosmos of a polytheistic imagination. Never, believe me, do the gods appear alone, wrote Schiller during the German Romantic revival of the ancient myths. Never alone, from which Edgar Wynne draws the principle that it is a mistake to worship one god alone. Our present plain style of single-minded unambiguity fails to grasp the mutual entailment, wind, of mythical configurations. We prefer to imagine them each standing like statues in a museum, quite separated, with descriptive labels explaining their traits and domains, but they don't stand still, and their domains overlap, since they are necessarily implicated in one another and complicated by one another. In fact, says Wind, complication rather than explication is the preferred method of polytheistic understanding. The pagan divinities are not merely polytheistic because there are so many of them, a multiplicity of distinct units. They are multiple in essence, unable to be separated out from the multiplicity of their localities, their appearances, their names, and the internal confluence with their peers. Polytheism is necessary to their natures, inherent in their images. Each is always all. It's really important for understanding the entire landscape of polytheistic pagan archetypal thinking that was present at the dawn of horoscopic astrology. Mars and Venus are always in the bed of the image. Even when the tale says they fly off and away from each other, they remain an inseparable archetypal conjunction. Where Mars is, Venus will be. Love and beauty, seduction, glamour and pleasure, intimacy and softness shall accompany Mars wherever he goes. These camp followers belong to his battle train. The world of war's horror and fear is also a world of desire and attraction. We have come to another place where understanding our subject is again most baffled. War's beautiful horror, its terrible love and exhilarating fusion called the sublime. I take my first notion of the sublime from a line in Wordsworth's Prelude, and I grew up, fostered alike by beauty and by fear, and from the fearful symmetry of Blake's Tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? I wanted to start us with that reading today, because what Hillman is pointing out is that one of our biggest problems when it comes to any kind of conjunction of planets is the tendency we have to both learn, study, and think about astrology in terms of things existing in solitary lists of adjectives, right? Like Mars, war, conflict, heat, courage, battle, being assertive, etc. But they never exist that way. They never exist purely alone. Is there any a time in the sky when the sky is not a collection of planets seeing one another by means of the aspectual lines of sight, by means of whole sign houses, by means of their parallels and conjunctions with fixed stars, or outer planets or asteroids or what have you? So planets are part of a polytheistic ancient world imagination that by its nature is about community and relationships, blending and mingling of archetypes, which is how we actually experience archetypes. That is why a big focus of my channel is to take the archetypes, combine, blend, and turn them and turn them and turn them so that you're always thinking about them in slightly different ways. Stereotypes exist in that turning, but they tend to be the default way we think about and talk about rather than only one way. That's basically the definition of an astrological stereotype. It's usually not wrong. It's just limited insofar as it becomes the de facto bottom line or the thing we go back to over and over, which in the long run will keep us very limited in our ability to delineate and think and see and be astrological in our lives. So what I love about Hillman's work is he's always turning the jewels of the archetypes and helping us see the way in which they are interrelated. There is no better time to see the interrelationship of two archetypes than when they conjoin in the sky, because the conjunction was actually not an aspect to ancient astrologers. It didn't fall into the category of an aspect. And that is because in all aspects, you have, okay, so sextile, you have the right and left hand sided aspects. You've got a sextile, you've got a trine, you've got a square on both sides. And then you have an opposition, 7 lines of sight for the 7 traditional planets. And then you have aversions, places that whole signs and planets in these whole signs don't see one another and so forth. And in that collection of aspects, everything is related to either through the opposition in terms of archetypal opposition, polarity, duality, where the two are opposed and very distinct, and you'll often get more of the feeling of them being opposites in a kind of grudge match. Of course, there's always the potential for fusion with oppositions, but it's why it's considered a hard aspect of the nature of Saturn. And then all the other aspects, you're always going to have a superior and inferior planet, where one planet is sort of asserting or inflecting its nature upon the other, where you have an active and a passive planet in a relationship. So you get one that's kind of more dominant than the other. There's no aspect like the conjunction in this regard, where the two archetypes blend and become as one. They are inseparable. And you'll feel and notice their minglings, their juxtapositions. You'll notice them in a way that's very different from an opposition, because it's like, as Hillman is saying, there's always a way in which archetypes that, even though they seem opposed, and Venus and Mars are, because they rule opposite signs, Taurus and Scorpio, Aries and Libra, that you will often think of them as opposites. And insofar as we only learn things in a vacuum and we think of archetypes as opposites and so forth, where our imagination is going to be incredibly limited, and our sense of humor most of the time, by the way. But anyway, so all of that being said, Hillman is asking us to consider Venus and Mars not as opposites, but as co-present archetypes that are fused within each other frequently in our experiences and in life. It's very uncomfortable for us, especially when it comes to a topic like war, which is why his book is, to my mind, one of the most provocative things ever and interesting things ever written about the subject of war, because it asks us to consider some of the major shadows that we don't see present in why war exists, and why it continues to have some kind of place in the world, even though most of us find it to be sort of a sick, not so good place, right? Anyway, so again, this is not to glorify war, right? It's not the point. The point is to explore the other kinds of archetypes that can be fused into Mars, especially Aphrodite, Venus. So when the lovers meet in Aquarius this week, from an archetypal point of view, let's turn the jewel. Let's think about desire, first of all, as something that really can be of the nature of Venus or Mars. It's a matter of how we get something that we want. I want something that I don't have that I believe will satisfy me. Okay, so I can go out and actively pursue it, Mars, or I can try to magnetically attract it, Venus. Just different ways of talking about desire. Desire, when Venus and Mars think about desire, one of the things that comes up is that desire is often born out of conflict, or has a very strong relationship with conflict. Why is that? Because if I don't have something that I want and I have to go actively pursue it, and usually I'm going to engage in the exertion of my will and a kind of struggle. And that struggle will usually bring up conflicts either within me or within the world, maybe because there's scarcity. Other people want the same thing and only some people can have it and other people cannot. Or there's work and effort involved, and perseverance and trials and frustrations and sacrifice. These are all very Marsy. Mars was not scared to peel off a little bit of its arm and throw it into the sacrificial fire to get something that it wants. And so anytime we think about the most beautiful things we desire and the things that we believe will satisfy us most and give us the most happiness, a very Venusian image, you can't really separate it from some level of conflict, pain, suffering. This is also why the joys of Mars and Venus in the traditional houses are paired next to one another. The sixth, Mala Fortuna, bad fortune, Mars, a place of sacrifice and hard work and effort to get what you want, kind of relentless and difficult, you know. Venus, the place of good fortune in the fifth, associated with Venus, and the place of good things coming, you know, and enjoyable, satiating things. Desire and conflict go together, and it's not that's not a good or bad thing. It's just a thing. And what we can do, though, is we can become more aware of it. We can become more aware of what desires create what kind of conflict, sacrifice, perseverance, work, will. And we can reflect on, you know, is that something that's really making us happy? Sometimes we spend a lot of time engaging in the effort and the conflict related to our desires. Maybe we could take a step back and like be more content with what we have, you know, less driven by what we don't, into the war for what we want. You know, each of us are being sent to war over a beautiful maiden in this respect, just like fairy tales. It's so mundane. We don't think about it that way, but that's what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, there's some things that you want, that you desire, that are beautiful, that you have to work for, that you have to suffer for, that you have to go to metaphorical battle over. And we enjoy it. And the thing is to be real about the fact that we enjoy it, and that we love adventures, especially when they're connected to things we desire. You could desire to be a great musician. Well, you're going to have to suffer to get there. Suffering with passion, that's a Mars thing. Passion means to suffer alongside of something that you carry with a love. The passion of the Christ, you'll hear that said too, right? So anyway, so just becoming more aware of the pairing of desire and conflict. Think about think about the kind of douchiest, grossest image of some guys fighting over a girl. Like, it's that. But it's more than that too. It can be much more beautiful than that. And it's that sort of, there's base images associated with the combination that kind of repugnant morally. And then there's others that are just so everyday. I want to read, I was talking about recently about people who wanted to redo their bathroom, and they were getting all fussy about it, and the contractors. And so it's like, yeah, desire and conflict, baby. They're old. Desire and jealousy. Venus, one of the shadows of Venus is jealousy. I want what she or he has, is in possession of, looks like. So, and then what we desire is connected to a kind of comparison and a competitiveness. Venus and Mars, the competition, the rivalry, the jealousy, the desire, the beauty, something really beautiful about other people and seeing what they have and holding that as an image up to ourselves and saying, I want to be that. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but look at how far and crazy it can get. Look at how people get possessed by it. And when I say that we can lose our sense of humor, what I mean is not that it's a particularly good look to go around being a jealous, comparative person who can't be happy with who they are and wants what other people have. That's not like a great look. But at the same time, it's like, it's so basic. And there's so many beautiful things. Like, if I told you the truth, like, there are many astrologers that set out an example to me, like, I want to be like that, and an appreciation is very close to jealousy at times for us. Sometimes we're teetering on an edge that we think is so morally perfectly clear, and I would never be jealous. I just appreciate. Is it really the truth? It's like, I don't know. So anyway, the point is we can have good senses of humor if we recognize the propensity to be jealous of and enter into entangled conflict with that which we also appreciate. So that's Venus and Mars. Desire and cooperation. One of the beautiful things that can come about from Venus and Mars is saying, there's something I want, but I have to cooperate. I have to cooperate to get there. You have to enter into meaningful social engagements to get where you want to go. And Venus, in this case, being a little bit more dominant, maybe that's one of the benefits in the sky right now. We're going to talk about galaxy brain stuff a little later in the week, but like, Venus being more strongly configured by dignities in the sky could certainly mean that we're more willing to cooperate with clashes of value or with desires and the kind of assertive, willful drive of Mars to go toward what it wants to win or accomplish. It might be more influenced by the cooperative forces of Venus. Remember, their child is Harmonia, right? It's beautiful. Harmonia is also a word that was used by ancient Greeks philosophically to describe what they believed the nature of the cosmos was. It was actually a marriage of all of these different forces that collectively express the togetherness, the intelligibleness, and the beauty and truthfulness of the universe, which includes archetypes that are very difficult, like Pluto, or like Mars or Saturn. They're a part of reality. And it's like the only way that we can start to see that and make peace with it. Make peace with it, meaning that we allow for it, not that we don't try to control it, and we don't compound our frustration or challenges with those archetypes by thinking that they have no place. We come to understand the mysteriousness of the universe and the just so-ness of all of the difficult archetypes. So they're part of it. And then we start to feel this deeper harmony. It's mysterious. You can't circumscribe it with your mind. You can't look around and explain rationally why every bad thing happens to every good person, or why cruelty or darkness or terror exist. But there starts to be a felt sense that nothing is really out of place. You can't do that. You can't get there unless you do the brave and I think very humorous work of looking at the marriage of these different archetypes within ourselves, not in big, you don't have to be a supervillain to identify the shadows in yourself, but you can, certainly any of us can identify these things. Yeah, I get jealous. Yes, what I want leads me into conflicts that are actually really contrary to the kind of peace or happiness that I guess I'm wanting out of all of this. You know what I mean? And it's not that we don't come to logical conclusions about experience and life activity as a matter of shutting them down. We come to these archetypal understandings so that we can go on living. We can do so with a bit of that hermetic understanding, that slippery, ironic, paradoxical back and forthness of life, and the interdependency of archetypes that places Mercury, Hermes, in the bed of the image, as Hillman said. So that's our goal. Astrology was called the science of Hermes. So desire and cooperation. We can desire things and then realize, well, I'm going to have a war council and a peace treaty in order to get things done. And that's a part of war too. It always has been. Number 4 is desire and compromise, very similar to saying, well, I can't have all that I want, but I can have some of what I want. There's got to be a give and take. Maybe, again, the potential this week is a little bit more for these nicer sounding, feeling expressions because of Venus's dominance. Staying aware of not only what we want, but why we want it and the shadows of why we want it. I think a really good exercise to do is when you really want something, you're feeling very solid about doing it, write out on a piece of paper, why do I want it? And then write out another little column, that says, what are the shadows of why I want it? And maybe in the first column, you write all the things that you feel are very good and virtuous or beautiful about what you want. And then in the other column, you just write down, like, what are the shadows? Be really honest. Have fun with it. Don't feel guilty. Just own it. We can be and experience and hold space for so many things at once. That's what's so beautiful about this. And that's where interesting writing comes from, interesting art comes from, interesting expressions of music. If you think about someone who's playing improvisational jazz music or something, so many times I've heard this said that a wrong note is only a wrong note if it isn't followed by the right thing. And so, identifying shadows within what we desire, we get so puritanical and rigid about that kind of exercise. Oh no, I'm pure. There's nothing wrong here, because what we're thinking is that things are actually black and white. And if I don't, stay in my mind or in my presentation as though I am only and always on the right side of things, then, there's going to be something wrong with me, or there'll be a penalty, or you got to trust that a universe that is as nuanced and beautiful and sophisticated and paradoxical looks at you in the same way that it understands itself. You have to trust that. And you have to be willing to say, Mars and Venus are both alive and well in me. And look at those shadows. When you look at the shadows, it doesn't make you more or less bad or good. It makes you whole. And then you can move with more sophistication. It's as though when we're willing to look at the shadows of why we want what we want, with Venus and Mars conjoining, that Hermes honors us and says, I love that. I love that you're going back and forth. I love that you're not trying to be a binary, like a kind of polarized situation you're creating in your head. I love that you're not going there. I love that you're moving freely and exploring nuances and complicated relationships between archetypes and themes. And when Hermes notices us doing that, it is as though Hermes becomes more active in guiding us moment to moment with these complicated relationships and helping us feel our way through the paradoxes, because there's guidance in that. There's guidance in this kind of honesty. You're honest with yourself about these shadows then, and you have a good sense of humor about it and a curiosity. Man, I mean, you're right there. You're allowing, that is Hermes coming forth. That attitude is the attitude that the psychopompos, the guide of souls, Hermes takes. That's the patron of our science in astrology. So anyway, that's my rant for today. I hope that this was useful for you guys. I hope you'll enjoy the conjunction of Venus and Mars as we can notice it in all these different ways. Hilda is very anxious to go out because Ashley just got home downstairs. So she's so excited, so excited. Hope you guys have a great day today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.